Hi, I'm Bonnie Mincu, Senior Certified ADHD Coach and founder of Thrive with ADD. You're listening to ADHD Self Mastery, and you may see a cat running in and out of the picture today. This episode is going to be a how to on breaking things down and capturing your thoughts visually in a way you can refer back to. You may have heard the expression, can't see the forest for the trees. That refers to when you get all caught up in details, but you lose sight of the big picture. Well, with ADHD, we're more likely to see only the big picture and have more difficulty discerning the details or components that make up that big picture. In other words, we see the forest, but we may not notice how it's made up of individual trees. There are a couple of reasons why it's really important to be able to break down a project into smaller parts. The first reason is to keep you from being overwhelmed by a large project. In a previous episode on overwhelm, I talked about how true overwhelm comes from your brain feeling like something is too much. As long as you're only seeing the totality of a project, you're not able to address it in small, manageable bites. The second reason you need to be able to easily break things down is if you tend towards all or nothing thinking. Usually, people who think this way aren't aware of it. So here's a little test. Imagine you have a decluttering or a home organizing project that you know will take you several hours or even days. Do you keep putting it off getting started because you don't have a large enough block of time to devote to it? Instead of picking a small segment of the room or just clearing off one shelf at a time, you're assuming you need to do all of it in one huge block. That's all or nothing thinking. The truth is, even if you found yourself with an entire day to spend on clutter clearing, you'd probably not want to. Most people would feel pretty daunted at the thought of spending hours at a time on their clutter. But if you could commit to it in 30-minute segments, it's a lot easier to handle. This is why you want to be able to shift your thinking automatically into a mode of breaking things down. Instead of seeing just the whole thing, you want to be able to see the individual parts that make up that whole. And then it's easy to plug in a short step into your schedule to get it done. As an example, this month I tiled my kitchen, or to be more specific, I used pretty white tile to cover up a really ugly gray backsplash that I'd always hated. I'd never done this before, so I needed to learn what to do and what not to do. Here were all the steps of this project. First is what I'd call a pre-step, which was going on YouTube to learn what materials I needed and what the steps of the work would be. I found a step-by-step video that explained that pretty well. Then I wanted to make sure I bought the materials recommended by the video guy for tiling on top of tile. He stressed an extra strong mortar, so I looked for it online. It turned out the only Home Depot that had that brand in stock was a 25-minute drive away. Once the materials were purchased, the house painter who was helping me tile had to measure and cut all the tiles where we'd have to install a partial tile at the end of a row. And then he mixed the mortar. We waited 15 minutes for it to thicken, and we slathered it on and placed the tiles. Well, it turned out that the cuts didn't fit and had to be recut. We didn't find out why until the end, when we realized we'd used the wrong size spacers. You wouldn't think an eighth of an inch would make such a difference. Just getting to this phase of placing all the tiles on my small kitchen backsplash somehow took over 4 hours. And then we couldn't grout until the next day. The painter grouted, which took much more muscle than I'd realized, while I went behind him wiping the excess grout off the tile before it dried. And finally, the next day, I had to seal all the white grout before it got dirty with kitchen grease. There were several points about this project that could be made for planning. First, it was necessary to realize and account time for each step of the project. And that included ones we hadn't been counting on, like having to drive so far to get the mortar we wanted. Second, some of the steps required a lot of time between them that we already knew about. For instance, the tiles had to be on the wall for 12 hours or more before grouting, and the grout had to dry about 12 hours before sealing. So if there were other projects to be done, they could be scheduled during those in between the tiling steps. Third, trying to rush in an early stage led to taking much more time and extra materials in a later stage. We should have laid out just a few of the tiles to see if they were coming out right instead of rushing to put up a whole big section before the mortar dried. If we had, we would have seen our mistake with the spacers right away. So it's worth budgeting in lots of extra time to do it right. What does this mean for project breakdown? Well, instead of putting tiling the kitchen as one item on a to-do list, I would have broken this out into several to-dos. Watch YouTube videos to learn how to tile over tile. Buy the materials. Measure the tiles for cuts. Cut the tiles. Mix the mortar and wait for it to thicken. Put up the tiles. This is the big stage, and leave longer for this than you think if you're inexperienced. Grout, clean off the excess grout, and seal the tiles. And these wouldn't need to be done all together. In fact, the only step requiring a big block of several hours was the actual mortar and tile phase. If breaking things down this way isn't something that you do naturally, stick around. After a short break, I'll show you how to use mind mapping as a quick, easy visual process for project breakdown and for planning.
Do your ADHD tendencies get in the way of you doing what you intend to? Traditional strategies for getting things done may not work for you. You need solutions tailored for your unique brain. In Bonnie Mincu's training membership program, Productivity Pathfinder, learn ADHD self-mastery step by step at your own pace in a supportive community with live online options each week. Learn more about Productivity Pathfinder at thrivewithadd.com.
Welcome back to ADHD Self-Mastery. I'm Bonnie Mincu. We've been talking about breaking down projects into steps of action to stay out of all or nothing thinking that can keep you from getting started. I just broke down the physical project of tiling my kitchen into all the steps involved. Now I want to walk you through how to use mind mapping to break down a project involving writing, research, planning, where the result will be a large document and presentation. Here's my example. Let's say that I need to create a presentation about adult ADHD that will be given at a conference for human resource professionals. I'll need a PowerPoint slide presentation and a report that will be given out at the conference. I'm going to break down this project into steps so I can plan it using a mind map technique. Now, there's free software for mind mapping, but I think it's easiest to just pull out a piece of paper and mind map by hand with a pen or pencil. I'll explain how to do that. First, take a piece of paper, like a big 8.5 by 11, and write small. Write the name of the project in the middle of the paper and draw a circle around it. Again, a small one. I'm calling this project ADHD presentation. In lines coming out from the center, you can label the primary stages of this project, and you should probably draw them diagonal, coming out from the center, and leave plenty of space between them. Or just start with one at a time, the first one you think of. I'll call these primary lines, and my first primary line is explain ADHD. And then I'll have secondary lines coming out of that primary line that break this stage down. One of them will be labeled basic definition of adult ADHD. Another will be primary types of ADHD. And coming out of that primary types line, I'll have detail lines that explain it further. One detail line I'll call inattentive type and one called hyperactive type. Now, at this point, I could even draw lines that go into more detail on each of these types, and they'd come out of the line that they pertain to. But wait, my ADHD mind is already jumping over to another main point that I want to put into the presentation. So I start another primary line coming out of the center that I label ADHD in the workplace. Here's where I want to present different ways that ADHD can be challenging at work. The first way I can think of is distraction. So I label a secondary line distraction. And for detail lines coming out of distraction, I label one of them too much stimulation, and another one is too quiet. because I need to explain how some people with ADHD can't focus if there's too much conversation around or people walking by their desk, but others do better in an open area and they have trouble focusing in an isolated office. Now, I'm still working off that primary line called ADHD in the workplace. Another secondary line I can think of is executive functioning. And ways that can be a challenge is in planning and in organizing. So I put planning and organization as detail lines. And I might add more detail lines off of each of these to explain it further. A third secondary line coming off of ADHD in the workplace is poor time sense. Most people with ADHD have difficulty estimating how long things will take. Their time sense is off, sometimes to a great degree. This can also lead to them being late to meetings or missing deadlines. So I'll add detail lines off of poor time sense called lateness and missing deadlines. And an important part of this presentation to human resource professionals is to help them understand the law regarding providing accommodations for ADHD. So a third primary line coming out of the center is accommodations. And there I'll explain what they need to know on that topic. So far, I've just broken down the areas I need to address in my presentation. But for my own planning purposes, I should think about how much research I need to do. I could list what I have to research off to the side, or I could create another primary line coming out of the center called research. And the lines coming off of that would be looking up a basic definition or explanation of ADHD and researching the law and how it might be applied for providing accommodations. Now, another way of handling that, if I didn't want to do a primary line called research, is simply to insert an R for research and circle it next to those steps on the mind map that I would have to research. And then I could go back and see how much research there is and estimate how long it would take. If I handled research as a separate step, for efficiency, I'd probably do all the research at the same time and put my findings aside to be inserted into the presentation. In this example, I not only have to write a written report, but also I have to create a PowerPoint slide presentation. And to keep it from being too boring, there'll probably be some graphics to go along with it. So I might want to have a primary line called graphics, and to list each graphic that I need to find and download from safe sources online. So now I have a mind map. What's the value of it? First of all, it allowed me to capture my thoughts instead of having them swirl around in my head. Now they're visually laid out. Writing or planning using a mind map is easy because it allows you to jump around in your thinking. If your mind leaps to a different aspect of the topic, just create a new line to represent that and begin filling out that section. You don't have to go in any kind of an order. In the mind map, I have a map of all the topics I'll be presenting on. So I know what I need to research, what I need to write about, and to create slides for. And this will certainly make the writing part a lot easier. And the mind map is a way of breaking down this big project into steps. I could estimate how long it will take me to write each section based on timing myself when I write the first one. Then I could give myself target dates or times to have completed various steps. And if I get behind from the very beginning, it's likely I was overly optimistic in my estimating. So those next time estimates would need to be modified. To recap this episode on project breakdown, we talked about why it's important to get in the mental habit of breaking down projects into smaller parts. And now you have the mind map tool as an easy way to break down those projects on paper. Or if you prefer software, just Google free mind map software to see what's available and get started. Breaking down projects into smaller parts is one way to break out of ADHD mental paralysis if you tend to be an all or nothing thinker. Just remember, having the steps of a project broken down is only as useful as your ability and commitment to do them. So right now, why not think of a project, even a small one, where you can practice breaking it down into steps using a mind map technique. And if now isn't a good time, enter an intention in your calendar or your planner to spend a bit of time on it. There are lots of potential ways you might find yourself mentally paralyzed with ADHD, and there are many different skills involved in planning. All of them are very learnable. The key is finding the strategies that work well for you. My affordable Productivity Pathfinder monthly membership program is designed to help you do that with training, coaching, and support for your journey to ADHD self-mastery. You can read about it and join at productivitypathfinder.com. This is Bonnie Mincu of Thrive with ADD. Please subscribe to this podcast, ADHD Self-Mastery, for more customized solutions for your unique brain.